Okay, so you ready to go deep on this one?
Let's do it. This one is a real head-scratcher.
It is. Red Museum, 10th episode of season 2.
December 9th, 1994.
A long time ago, but yeah, still resonates.
Oh, it does. It does. Red Museum. Definitely a classic in its own right.
For sure. Now, this deep dive is all about, well, going beyond just like, oh, here's what happened in the episode, right? It's about like the mysteries, the questions, what was going on in Delta Glen, Wisconsin, what were Mulder and Scully really up against.
Exactly. We've got some fascinating sources here that offer different perspectives, even some behind-the-scenes tidbits that I think you'll find particularly intriguing.
Oh, yeah. This is where things get really interesting. So for anyone out there who maybe needs a little refresher, The X-Files, it's all about these two FBI agents. You've got Mulder, right, who's like the ultimate believer in all things paranormal. And then you've got Scully, the skeptic, the scientist, always looking for a rational explanation.
A perfect pairing, wouldn't you say? They balance each other out so well.
Totally. And in Red Museum, their investigation takes them to this seemingly quiet town where things are definitely not as they appear.
Oh, not at all. We start off with this really bizarre scene, right? Teenagers wandering around in their underwear, totally out of it, and on their backs, these cryptic messages. He is one, she is one. It's creepy, it's unsettling. What do you make of that right off the bat?
Well, I mean, it's classic X-Files, right? You've got the strange phenomenon, the small town, the sense that something's just a little bit off. It's like a hook that pulls you right in.
Absolutely. And like in many X-Files cases, Mulder and Scully's initial investigation leads them to a group on the fringes of society. In this case, it's the Church of the Red Museum, a vegetarian cult led by this guy, Richard Odin.
A vegetarian cult. That's not something you see every day.
Not every day, no. So they go to observe one of the Red Museum's ceremonies, and Mulder, being Mulder, jumps right into this theory about walk-ins, the idea that these cult members are being inhabited by like these enlightened spirits or something.
Always thinking outside the box, that Mulder. But then things take a turn for the worse.
Oh, yeah. The case escalates quickly when a young woman, Katie, is kidnapped. When they finally find her, the medical examination reveals something really disturbing.
What's that?
High levels of scopolamine in her system, along with some unknown alkaloid.
Scopolamine, isn't that like a really powerful drug?
Exactly. It's a controlled substance, not something you can just pick up at the corner store, usually only accessible to medical professionals.
So now we've got a possible medical connection to these strange events.
Right. And that leads them to dig deeper into Richard Odin's background. Turns out he's a former doctor, Dr. Herman, who was actually investigated for practicing without a license.
So this cult leader has a shady medical past. Things are starting to get pretty interesting.
Definitely. And the tension between the cult and the rest of the town, it's palpable. Remember that scene outside the BBQ restaurant? The Red Museum members in their white robes and red turbans blocking the entrance?
Yeah, it's a really striking visual, and it shows just how deep the divide is between these two groups.
For sure. But just as you think you're starting to understand what's going on, the investigation takes a turn in a completely different direction. Remember that guy in the truck? The one who approaches Mulder and Scully?
Yeah, the one who seems really worried about something. What was it?
Growth hormones. He tells them about these two men injecting cows with this experimental growth serum. And he's convinced it's having some kind of effect on the townspeople, making them more aggressive.
He even mentions a statistic about 7 rapes by high school boys. That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is, and it really highlights these anxieties about scientific progress and the unintended consequences it can have.
The episode really plays on that fear that something seemingly beneficial can actually have a dark side.
For sure. And then, to make things even more complicated, the local doctor, Dr. Larson, is killed in a plane crash.
But this isn't just any plane crash, is it?
No, it's not. They find a briefcase at the crash site with a lot of cash and some unidentified chemicals.
And it turns out Dr. Larson delivered all of the kidnapped teenagers, even the ones from different towns. That's a pretty big coincidence, don't you think?
Not just a coincidence. They also find credit card numbers belonging to the victims' families in his briefcase. So now it looks like he might have been targeting them specifically.
But before they can really dig into that, one of the men injecting the cows is murdered. And guess who's seen leaving the scene?
The crew cut man. And for those who might not remember, he's the same guy who killed Deep Throat back in season 1.
His reappearance is a huge deal. It connects this seemingly isolated case in Delta Glen to the larger conspiracy that's been building throughout the series.
Exactly. And when Mulder and Scully visit Beth, the mother of one of the victims, they get another clue. She mentions that Dr. Larson was giving her son vitamin shots.
So now we've got a clear link between the abductions, the growth hormones, and Dr. Larson.
And it gets even creepier when Mulder discovers a hidden room in Beth's house with videotapes and a camera. Someone's watching these kids.
That's just plain disturbing.
It is. And then tragedy strikes close to home for Sheriff Mazeroski. His son, Rick, is abducted and found dead with the same markings as the other victims.
And to make matters worse, the crew cut man is seen leaving the scene of the crime.
Which really sets the stage for what happens later.
So they finally track down the owner of the house with the hidden room, this guy named Gerd Thomas.
And he confesses to the kidnappings. He says he was trying to purify the children, that he thought they were turning into monsters because of Dr. Larson's injections.
But here's the thing. During the interrogation, Scully makes a huge connection. She recognizes the crew cut man from a previous case.
The assassination of Deep Throat. This seemingly isolated incident in Delta Glen is now directly tied to the conspiracy at the highest levels of the government.
And the toxicology report throws another wrench into the mix. They find an unidentified substance labeled purity control. What do you make of that?
It's another piece of the puzzle, but one that raises more questions than answers. Mulder immediately jumps to the conclusion that it's alien DNA.
Of course he does. It wouldn't be an X-Files episode without at least a hint of extraterrestrial activity.
True. But with all the other elements at play, the scopolamine, the growth hormones, it's not clear if that's the only explanation.
So, with the lives of Dr. Larson's other patients potentially at risk, Mulder convinces Sheriff Mazeroski to move their families to the Red Museum for protection.
A bit ironic, considering they initially suspected the cult.
It is, but it shows just how much the situation has changed. Now, the Red Museum, the place they thought was the source of the problem, is their only safe haven.
And then the episode builds to this tense climax. Mulder tracks the crew cut man to a beef processing plant, but he gets trapped in a freezer.
With the whole place doused in gasoline, it's a pretty classic thriller setup.
It is. And just as the crew cut man is about to light the place up, Scully arrives with the sheriff and his deputies.
But Sheriff Mazeroski, driven by grief and rage over his son's death, shoots and kills the crew cut man.
A moment of understandable, but ultimately frustrating vengeance. Mulder loses his chance to get any answers from the one man who could have explained everything.
And to make matters worse, they can't find any records on the crew cut man. It's like he doesn't even exist.
A ghost in the system.
And they never figure out what that purity control substance was.
The case remains officially open and unsolved, but there's one final detail that adds another layer of intrigue.
What's that?
All of the children who received Dr. Larson's injections got sick with a flu-like illness. But the kids at the Red Museum, the ones who follow a strict vegetarian diet, they didn't get sick.
So maybe the cult was unintentionally serving as a control group in some kind of experiment.
It's a chilling thought.
It is. Now, beyond the main story, there are some really interesting behind-the-scenes details about this episode. Did you know that Red Museum was originally supposed to be a crossover episode with Picket Fences?
No way!
Yeah.
That would have been wild.
I know, right? Picket Fences was this quirky show set in Rome, Wisconsin. Imagine Mulder and Scully interacting with all those eccentric characters.
It's a shame it never happened. Apparently, CBS pulled the plug at the last minute.
Such a missed opportunity. Although the Picket Fences episode that aired the following week apparently had a few subtle references to the events in Delta Glen.
Oh, really? Like what?
Just a quick mention of Dr. Larson, things like that. Little Easter eggs for those who knew what to look for.
That's cool. It's like a little nod to what could have been.
Definitely. And speaking of nods to the past, the return of the crew cut man was a big deal for fans of the show.
He was such a menacing figure. His presence really ramped up the tension.
But apparently not everyone was happy with how his story ended. Glenn Morgan, one of the writers, was disappointed that he was killed off so quickly.
I can see why. He was such a pivotal figure in the mythology, the guy who killed Deep Throat. It would have been interesting to learn more about his motivations.
Yeah, and James Wong, the other writer, reportedly found the episode a bit confusing overall.
Even though he acknowledged that there were some really neat ideas in there.
It seems like Red Museum was a bit of a challenge to put together, but it definitely left a lasting impression.
Oh, yeah. And we also learned some interesting things about the filming locations. They actually shot the episode in Ladner, British Columbia, which stood in for Delta Glen, Wisconsin.
And they used real employees from a beef processing plant in Cloverdale as extras in the butchering scenes.
Wow, that's pretty authentic. Must have added to the creepiness factor.
Definitely. And Red Museum is actually the first episode where we hear about walk-ins.
Really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, Mulder's initial theory about the Red Museum members being inhabited by spirits. It's a concept that comes back in a big way later in the series.
It's amazing how these seemingly small details can become major plot points down the line.
Totally. And even though it got some mixed reviews, Red Museum was a hit with viewers. It drew in almost 10 million households.
That's huge.
It just goes to show how much people were hooked on the X-Files, even when the episodes get a little weird.
And Red Museum definitely had its share of weirdness. The whole vegetarian cult thing, the growth hormones, the creepy hidden room. It's a lot to process.
It is, and it all taps into this larger theme that runs throughout the X-Files. This fear of the unknown, of science gone wrong, of hidden agendas lurking beneath the surface of everyday life.
It makes you question everything. You start to wonder what's really going on in the world around you.
That's the brilliance of the X-Files. It leaves you with more questions than answers, and it makes you think about the world in a whole new way.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the big questions that Red Museum leaves us with?
Well, we still don't know what purity control was or what the crew cut man's ultimate goal was. And of course, there's the tantalizing question of what that picket fence's crossover could have been.
So many mysteries, so little time, but that's part of what makes the X-Files so compelling. It keeps us guessing, it keeps us thinking, and it reminds us that the truth is out there, somewhere.
Maybe just hidden in plain sight.
Maybe. So until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and never stop questioning.
Because you never know what you might find.
Exactly.